Hey folks, it's January 2nd, 2025. That means it is Thursday, and Thursday is feeding day. So what I want to do today is have you stick around, take a look at how I put the food together, and then we're going to actually refresh a bin and feed it at the same time. So we will talk to you then. No. So let's mix up the food. All right, what I've got here is my dried cow manure. Let's put some of that in there. Now when I say dry, this is dry. This is like if you put it in a glass of water, it would float. And I like to use it like that because the actual food, we got bananas, we got some potato peels, more bananas, some squash, a lot of lettuce, some broccoli stalks, carrots, whatever, it's in there. And what we're going to do is mix it together with the sifted cow manure, and that cow manure will get a lot of the moisture out of it so that the worms aren't swimming in their food. Now, I got to tell you, again, if you've seen some of my other videos, what I do with all my lettuces and greens, kale, there's everything in here, is I freeze it first in a gallon Ziploc bag. I have multiples of them in the freezer. And then I take them out and I let them thaw overnight. And it all goes into a bucket, and I dunk the bucket out into my plants, or in the beds where the plants will be next year. I think that helps the soil in that area. It's going to get a lot of the bacterias and all that, even though they'll go to sleep over the wintertime, but they'll be back for next year. And then I just give this a good squish. Now, if you'll notice, what is it, the Food and Drug Administration and dietary folks? Colorful diets. That's what we need. Oh, I forgot. I normally, my banana peels, I will cut them up. There's like probably 4 old bananas in here, and this one that didn't get cut up. And I do that because I think it allows the microbes to get into it, more surface area. And they don't, I think they break down a lot quicker that way too. You don't find them in there 2 weeks later. So, okay, that's good enough. The main thing is to make sure, as best you can, that everything's got a little bit of the cow siftings, because that's going to help to add immediate bacteria to the food. Microbes break it down, the worms eat it. Let's feed some worms. All right, folks, let's feed some worms. Before we do, I want to show you a little bit about what I've got going on in the worm bin itself that we're going to be refreshing and feeding. Now, I don't do this every time I feed. I only do it when I refresh the bin, and I usually refresh my bins about once a month. But first thing we've got, shredded cardboard. And I'll show you what I use this for when we go to feed. Bark, right out there from an old dead oak, right down against the ground. I'll show you what we use that for. That's refresh only. BioChar. I make this BioChar myself. This has already been inoculated. It's been outside in a mixture that I use to go ahead and refresh the BioChar. But once it goes into the worm bin, again, it'll be recharged again with all the bacteria that come from our wonderful earthworms. And leaves. Now this is I don't know what the size of it is. This is actually 2 full grocery paper bag size bags of leaves that have been ground down in my grinder. And actually those 2 bags were actually chipped beforehand. So if you think about it, those were already broken down quite a bit. This is a whole lot of, should I cover that? This is a whole lot of leaves right in here. And this, again, I use this pretty much whether I do, mostly during my wet feedings, because this is really dry and it helps to absorb a lot of the moisture. And these guys, I know they're not on the top because I've been banging around in here, and they're probably not real happy with me. The exact coffee filter. What I'm looking to do today is basically to fluff this up, give it a little bit of air. Now this, like I said, hasn't been turned in at least a month. Oh, there's one of my things in there. We're going to use a different bin, actually, because I'm going to do this one differently. I'm sorry. Okay, mistake number one. Let's put these guys back and grab a different one. Let's try you guys. Oh, I think we did you in a different video, because there's our celery stalk growing up. You notice I have a lot of these quahog shells in there. There's a little piece of skin from some squash from the last feeding. Back to where we were. I'm going to fluff these up, give them some oxygen. This is really not too compacted, which is pretty good, considering it's been a month since I did this the last time. You know, I always hate this. You get these guys, they're growing, and you're like, oh no, I really don't want to rip you out of the ground. But you know what? I think it'll be all right. Just plant them over here for now. Ooh, delicious. There's a nice worm ball. So what I'm kind of doing is putting everything on one side while I'm loosening up the very underneath of the soil, very bottom of the bin. Get some oxygen down in there. Get these worms from doing their slow crawl to actually moving quick. I gotta go, I gotta go. Now right at the bottom here, what I do is I will take some of my BioChar. Not a lot, but just enough to help to cause some air pockets down on the bottom and to further inoculate the biochar that I'll be using next year in my garden at the farm. Oh, Cedar Song Farm. I'm sorry, I'm Jim, Cedar Song Farm. Here in beautiful, windy Connecticut right now today. Temperature's not that bad. The sun's shining. Let's plant you back where you were. The next week or so, though, is going to get cold. But it is January. We've been spoiled. We've had some really good weather. We put up, just in the last 3 days, 2 cords of wood because I was late to do it. But we got that done. Notice I do put in whole leaves. I mean, I think the worms, they like to rub up against these things. I don't know, maybe it helps to even release cocoons. And while we're talking about that, let me show you what I do as another thing that I help. I think it helps the worms release their cocoons. And it's something they'd find in their natural environment. And that is the wood chips. Now, this has got a lot of fungal bacteria inside of it. And although I know worms are primarily a bacterial thing, I think adding the fungal varieties, I don't think it can hurt. I don't put a whole lot in. What you doing, guy? Girl? Worm? Come on. Let's go down. Put a little bit more, some of this down in there. My wife bought me let's equate it to a husband buying or his wife a vacuum cleaner. She bought me a new paper shredder. And this is actually cardboard box. What do they call it? Cross-shredded? Cross-cut? I think it does a great job. We'll be using that more and more as we go. All right, so we've got our biochar in there. We've got our bark in there. And now we're just going to kind of flip everybody back over again. Now this also helps to get all these leaves that haven't broke down completely, get them down towards the bottom. The worms will like it. All right, now we'll get to the feeding part. Now, because this one here, this is a bus bin. It's not one of the full-size bins you get at your Home Depot or your Lowe's. This is just a bus bin, and I got a really good deal on these. So sometimes I will feed horizontally, and other times diagonally. I don't know if that's right. Sometimes I'll feed going this way, and sometimes I'll feed going this way. Today, we're just going to open up a spot in the center here. And to help absorb a lot of that moisture and to add carbon, we're going to put some more of the cardboard shred in there. And now, the buffet. Now, even though this has been frozen, thawed, drained, left overnight, it's still going to release a lot of moisture. And again, that's what that cardboard's going for. We'll make sure it gets a piece of that delicious pumpkin. And then we'll just roll it over. Cover it up so no junk gets in it. Besides, the worms feed towards the top and a little bit down towards the bottom at the same time too. And we don't have a coffee filter for this one. They must have ate that all up. So let's put one on. This one's a little bit moist still, because I've got it in a little bowl full of them. So I'm not going to bother moistening that. The moisture here feels really good. Oh, I almost forgot one of the most important things. Speaking of moisture, here's our shredded leaves. Now think about how many leaves are in there. We're not going to use a lot, but we are going to just give them a good dusting. Right on the top. Now, since these have been shredded, there might be one leaf in that one little spot right there, but it's because it's been shredded. It's more easily available for the bacteria to get to it, and then for the worms to get to it. So that's pretty much the way I refresh a bin. There's a lot of different ways. This is not a how to do it video. This is a how I do it video. And I think the reason why this works out well, at least for me, the way that I do it, like I said, there's 100 ways to do it, is it keeps the moisture levels down. It adds the biochar to the castings. When I use these castings, they're going to be basically infused with the biochar, and it'll all be there for my plants to be able to do well with next year. So I wanted to get a little bit of a closer look as to how I do the refresh. Basically just flipping soil over. While I do this, I also take a look at the worms, make sure they all look good and healthy. kind of judge the ages of the population. Ooh. You're a beauty. Now here in Connecticut, it's getting kind of cold. The average temps of these bins in my wormery is about between 60 and 65, which is plenty fine for these guys. Red wigglers. There may be some blues in here, I have no idea. Although I think for the most part, they're red wigglers. We'll add a little bit of biochar. A little bit of the bark. A little bit of fungi for them. Not a lot. Got some squash skins. Slow food. I always feel kind of bad when I do this because I know it's totally disrupting them. I'm sure they're not real happy with me. But I think they'll find that the end result is worth getting jostled around a little bit. I do try to be as gentle as I can. And a little bit more biochar. Again, folks, this is a how I do it. This is not a how to do it video. I just find that it seems to work well for me. And in doing the science on it, it sounds logical. This guy's not rooting yet. Sure it will shortly. And some ground up leaves. Now you might wonder why I don't moisten these, even though they're extremely dry. It's because they'll soak up the moisture from the leaves in there and the worms crawling around them. They'll get nice and moist. And I use a plastic top. Have to right now because I run wood stoves in the furnace. It dries the air out quite a bit. Real low humidity, probably 30 to 40%. Now again, I only feed wet once a week. I feed dry 4 days after I feed the wet. So that leaves another, 3 days until I feed wet again. And as you can see, when I took this all apart, there was no food left. I think that's real important. Okay, I've got the time. I go overboard. I really do. I go overboard on the science of my worms. I go overboard on the feeding, the nutrition. I'm retired. I have time. I can do that. Do you have to feed them once a week? Do you have to feed them twice a week? No. But notice I don't feed a whole lot. When I come back, the food's gone, the castings are on the top, we're good to go. The moisture levels never get too high or too low. I'll give you guys another dose of leaves here. And it works. So, Come on, buddy. Go down there. All right, guys. I'm going to be having a lot more videos. In fact, I think the next video I've got coming on is going to be how I use my coffee grounds and how I supercharge them so that when I give them to the worms, it's readily available. And we will talk to you later. Thanks for watching.